In this week's episode, Genesis Fisher, founder and principal attorney at Fisher Law Practice, and I will chat about how Shopify handled layoffs, Pottery Barn's inclusive line, the latest apprentices, and more. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I've found is that there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for DEI stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these inclusive actions and policies within your own organization to help you build a more inclusive world. Let's get started. Genesis, will you please introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much, Bernadette. I'm so happy to be here and to talk to all of you. I am a conflict resolver and a professor at New York Law School. And as a conflict resolver, what I do is I help businesses and families, we, including my team, resolve conflict and help people communicate better and learn from one another and find solutions together.
That's awesome. Do you want to share a little bit about your background and
Yeah, of course. I'm an attorney by training. I started out doing civil rights work at the Southern Poverty Law Center. I was a public defender in New York for 8 years, and I was at this crossroads where I was trying to figure out what to do next. And just this random encounter on the street, I walked in between some arguing people and helped them figure out solutions. And I was like, oh my God, I think I want to be a mediator. And it launched an entire new career trajectory. And I've been doing it now for about 7 years, and I love it. And especially with what's going on in the world, it's a great place to be.
I've known you for a while now, but I did not know that's how you had your lightning bulb moment about your business trajectory. That's really cool, actually.
Thanks.
So, can you share some of what you see as sort of the relationship between conflict resolution and diversity, equity, and inclusion? Where do they meet there?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. Conflict resolvers love conflict. Mediators love conflict because there are opportunities for growth. There are opportunities to get more information out there. There's so many opportunities that come from conflict. That's how the world changes. And so with DEI, it's great that there's more universal support and acceptance that this is important for all of us to be on board for. But part of the nexus with conflict resolution is making sure that the right people are at the table who are, developing policies and procedures and putting things into action, and making sure that people have a voice to really share what the needs are so that people aren't developing approaches and solutions that don't really fit the needs. And the needs are very specific depending on the business or the industry.
I mean, and so just as the needs of every individual is unique, right? So it's all about, each individuality, and that's sort of a core part of DEI.
Of course. And just even thinking about, at least from my perspective in the legal field, what we often get involved when something has happened, there's been an incident, and how people resolve that incident is going to be very different for each person. Some people want an apology, some people want a policy change, some people want to just be moved and forget about it, but you have to be able to give people the space to articulate what those needs are.
Cool. And is that part of what you do in your practice, is work with organizations to internally resolve some issues that might come up regarding diversity?
Yes, we definitely handle a lot of issues around diversity, gender, race, disability. Just even making sure that people with different diagnoses are getting to the table in the same way. And we often start with talking to key stakeholders, talking to people just for an hour to see what's going on with you, what do you think the needs are, and what are your recommendations, and then from there getting everyone together in a room to figure things out.
Cool. That sounds great. Well, I'm happy to have you as a referral partner, and I'm happy to have you on the show today. So let's get into today's good vibes. The first story comes from Shopify. So Shopify actually is one of the tech companies that recently had a big layoff. They laid off 1,000 employees. So I originally shared this as a piece of good vibes because I really love the letter that the CEO Tobi Lütke wrote to his employees. First, he really owned up to the mistakes he made, the risk he took in attempting to grow the company, and he apologized for, essentially guessing wrong and betting wrong. Then he went ahead and shared some of the perks that departing employees, are still going to have access to, like internet, money for new hardware, opportunities to get employment opportunities elsewhere. And then he went ahead and reiterated the company's purpose to remaining employees. So I really like this story, but I'll be honest with you. I received an email today from someone who read the piece, and he said, you know what? This dude made $20 million last year, and he cashed out more than $623 million in equity. So, maybe we
Oh.
should not be applauding this CEO. So, I got it wrong. So I will, I will be sharing my apology in the next newsletter as well. Anyway, I still think there's some good news in this story.
Oh yeah, I mean growth. You're not going to necessarily see growth in every direction at one time, but it is great that the messaging has shifted. I mean, I can't speak to what the CEO is doing, but oftentimes what we see, and especially in conflict resolution or in general, is like making sure that you get a sense of all the resources that are available to you, not just what historically has been. And it seems like that's what they're kind of doing here is making sure that they're supporting folks with a variety of resources, not just economic.
That's exactly right. A whole variety of resources, kind of a holistic approach to resources, which I think is great. I mean, I think that there's something to be said here for a more humanitarian approach to layoffs. We certainly have seen other companies not do so well in terms of their approach to layoffs. I searched Twitter, and I didn't see a lot of shade thrown towards Spotify in the tweets before I wrote the newsletter. So, I think overall, people, excluding the executive compensation piece, people seem to be okay with how this has been handled. Something to be learned. All right. So the next story is about Vice President Kamala Harris, who in a speech specifically said, I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit. And so this was a speech to disability advocates. But I still think it's really important and notable that someone in that level of leadership at the company used visual descriptors, which is a way to be inclusive of visually impaired folks, and also shared her pronouns. Like, I think this is a really nice precedent.
Oh, 100%, 100%. I mean, I think a lot of us are kind of on board with the pronouns, or at least getting on board and seeing that more and more in Zooms and our email signatures and things like that. But what really struck me was the description, because a lot of us in this field and in this work, we're focused on inclusivity, but sometimes I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I can get a little bit tunnel vision. Sometimes people on my team will be like, well, hey, maybe to this video, we should add something that's like, we should add captions, or we should add this or that. And so it's important to be thinking like holistically. And it's an important reminder, I think, it was an important reminder for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always really important to be aware of what we don't know and constantly looking to expand our frame of reference. On another episode, I talked about my own mistakes regarding lack of accessibility within some of the image posts that were posted to the company page, or some of the posts that were posted to our company's social media page. Now they have image descriptions. I mean, we're all learning, right? But I think when someone at this level is putting herself out there in that way. And she got a lot of shade from right-wing media and politicians about this. It actually trended. But I think it's still a great story. Okay.
She's going to get shade about anything she does, though. So.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. The third story of this week is about how Disney has replaced the terminology being used for the Bibbidi Bobbidi boutique employees. So bear with me on this one. Currently, or prior to the pandemic, because the boutiques were closed during the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, the employees who help children play dress up with, the cast members who help children play dress up, they were called fairy godmothers in training. So, fairy godmothers in training, implying that these employees are women or mothers, right? So, fairy godmothers in training. So, now the new revised term for these cast members is fairy godmothers apostrophe S apprentices. So, does that make sense? So the term is now, it's not that they're godmothers in training, it's that they are the godmothers apprentices. So possessive. So the term is now gender neutral as opposed to being specifically a gendered female term. So I appreciate this because Disney has actually done quite a few things to be more gender inclusive.
Yeah, I had to read it a couple of times. I'm like, wait a minute, what's the shift there? But it's a really interesting passing of the baton, right? Thinking about the fairy godmothers as a collective that are looking for recruits and passing the baton. And I like the idea of even an apprenticeship. I can imagine them like in a a workshop somewhere. One of them is a blacksmith or something like that. But anyway, I like the imagery that comes up for this. So kudos.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's fun. I think that the kids are going to think it's fun. I think that it, offers more cast members the ability to have these positions. It's sort of winning all around. All right, next story comes from Pottery Barn, which has unveiled a line of furniture. Well, there are 150 pieces of their furniture which have been redesigned specifically for people with disabilities. So most of these pieces of furniture were previously inaccessible. For example, desks that weren't wide enough to fit a wheelchair. Now 150 pieces have been redesigned. I love this story.
Yes, it's fantastic. I think another piece too is that I think we can all support these pieces because we all benefit from things that have a broader range of access, right? Being able to move the mirror means that shorter people can use it, not just folks who may be in a wheelchair. Having power lift in more chairs can mean that if we're injured or have a broken foot that we can use it, right? That not just Nana. I think all of these things, these types of products are things that everyone should be supporting.
That's exactly right. And what's really cool, Genesis, is that these products are the same price. So the power lift chair is the same price as the non-power lift chair. And you're exactly right. I mean, there's a lot of people that can benefit from these products. I think that's really great that they're not making these a premium offering.
I didn't know that. That's even better.
Yeah. All right. So the next story comes from HSBC Bank, which is the UK version of the bank, which is also looking to be as gender free as possible. So the bank removed references and requests for gender in some of its products. So now when someone's opening up certain bank accounts and mortgage products, there's no box asking gender. They have removed the labels husband and wife and replaced them with spouse. But why would husband and wife even have been in there in the first place? I don't know. Anyway, it has simplified its procedures for changing names for transgender customers and overall is moving towards a more gender-free customer experience.
That's great. Just as you put in your blog post, why are so many of these things gendered? It's so antiquated, and it's from a system where a really old system where you have the head of the household who is expected to do most of these things, and you have to have roles to define who has access to what. But that's so 60 years ago. That's so 90 years ago, and I'm glad that a lot of these companies are finally coming around.
Yeah, Genesis, that's a good point because let me tell you, a lot of the themes of this newsletter are better late than never. Honestly,
Yes.
it's true because some of the stories we talk about were like, really, the first Black person to do X, like really, like in some of these stories, I'm like, wow, we're there, and I'm going to celebrate it because it's about building momentum. But yeah, this is an example of why is this even a thing?
Totally, and I know we're running out of time, but even just thinking about spouses in general, I'm not married, and so I'll see a lot of documents that assume that because I'm the age that I am married or divorced or something. And so there's just like, again, the question is why? Like, why do we need these? Why do we need these separators? Anyway.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining me on today's show, Genesis. It's been great catching up with you. And if you, for those folks listening or watching, you can check out Genesis on LinkedIn, Genesis Fisher, and fisherlawpractice.nyc. Thank you so much for joining for 5 Things in 15 Minutes. If you don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. Thank you so much and have a great week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 Minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 Minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.